I've got a couple different videos to highlight that. And a lot of these regulations, like Dodd-Frank, came out of the financial crisis. Have you guys gone to Khan Academy before? For any sort of tutorials of any sort? Khan Academy, K-H-A-N. Have you heard of it?
Oh yeah, I've seen like math tutorials.
I was gonna say, yeah, it does a lot of math stuff. The thing we're gonna watch is him put these, and you guys maybe once you see it, you'll recognize it. He uses kind of simple graphs on the computer screen, because he started doing this when even the technology wasn't that great. And this is a video where he was being interviewed right at about the financial crisis, and it's kind of interesting, some of the predictions that he makes. Let's see here, there we go. So the point with these videos, this one was filmed in like October 10th, I think it was. It was uploaded to YouTube on the 28th of 2008. So this is right when AIG and some of these were starting to fail. And so Khan from Khan Academy was interviewed on trying to explain why the system was imploding. And then after that, we'll start to see where government regulation came in to try to plug some of those holes. So.
Obviously, throughout the course of this discussion, I want to bring somebody in now that I'm really excited about having on the show. He's totally different from most of the people that we talk to. He gained his fame on YouTube, of all places, where people go to see how he explains things that many of us frankly don't understand. So let's start with the basics, Sal Khan. Thanks so much for being with us from the Khan Academy, by the way. Basic question. Explain to our viewers, explain to the millions of people out there, what is actually broken that we fix. Right. And right now we have so many, the stock market goes down every day and people are having foreclosures and banks are stopping lending and they're failing. So it's really hard for people to keep track of what is the problem. Are these just causes of the problem or are they the actual problem? So I think we need to take a step back, and I've drawn a whole diagram here. Let's put it up. Draw a little diagram here. And I think there's a basic fundamental question that we all have to ask. And what does the financial system do? They make a lot of money. Hopefully they add some value to our economy. And this diagram essentially explains what the financial system does. So in a capitalist economy, you have a lot of people with capital. That could be land, that could be gold, that could be, animals, that could be cash. And what you need to do in order to make the economy grow is invest that capital into projects, build factories, plow seeds, hire people. And what the financial system does, the markets, they take that capital and hopefully they allocate it on projects that actually put people to work, hire people, grow our GDP. The problem right now is as opposed to the financial system actually putting more capital into the real world, it's for the most part more concerned with self-preservation at the moment. They're kind of in survival mode. And because they're in survival mode, you don't have this flow of capital going from whoever has it to the financial system and then to the projects. You would pretty much have everything just going back into the financial system because it's in essentially survival mode. So I see the financial system in the middle. Why is that piece broken? Draw that one up for us. Sure. And here I'm going to attempt to give everyone a 5-minute MBA. But essentially, what I'm drawing here is our balance sheets for some banks. And it might sound like a complicated term, but a balance sheet is, I think, something that people are fairly familiar with when they talk about home equity. So if I were to draw a balance sheet for someone's house, it would look something like this. So the asset would be your house, whatever it's worth. And then your liability, and I'll call that A for asset. And then your liability would be your mortgage. Your liability would be the loan. Now, if your house is worth $1 million and your loan, let's say you owe $800,000 on your loan, whatever's left over is your equity. Right. That's a balance sheet. That's a balance sheet that I think most people are fairly familiar with. For corporations, they have the exact same notion. And I think this is an important point to realize when people talk about the stock market and what does it mean for a company's stock to go to zero. When you buy a stock in a company, you're not buying a share in all of its assets. You're buying a share in its equity. So if you look at, so I drew two banks here, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's broken, but a bank has assets and a bank has liabilities. And if you take the sum of the assets and you subtract out the liabilities, what's left over is essentially the equity. And when you
So he's got all the bank assets that we looked at some other stuff, right? And then the liabilities, he's got bank A and bank B, and then the possibility of making loans. So here's a loan from B, loan to A. So a loan to A is an asset for bank B, and the liability for bank A.
Buy stock in a bank or any company, you're essentially taking a share of that. So what's broken here is through the housing bubble, a lot of these banks, in order to facilitate this whole securitization, I can go more detail into what that is, they essentially accumulated these assets on their balance sheets. And this has been the central focus of the entire bailout plan. And there's been a lot of talk about toxic CDOs and what are they worth. But I just want to show you what they do to a bank's balance sheet and why it's so important that we figure out what these things are worth. Because you see here, I drew you can kind of do the height of this left-hand side is the assets, the height on the right-hand side is the liabilities. What's left over is the equity. If these toxic CDOs are worth nothing, if this disappeared, then all of a sudden, your assets are worth less than your liabilities. If your house is worth less than your mortgage, then you have no equity. In that situation, your stock would be worthless. And in that situation, there's no reason why anyone should be lending to you, because you're essentially throwing good money after that.
So essentially, the situation that the banks find themselves in is the same as the one that homeowners have found themselves in as a result of this.
Pretty much. Homeowners, you have an asset that's worth less than your liabilities. What do? Do you try to get someone to bail you out and buy your asset for more than it's worth, or do you just declare bankruptcy?
Let's hold out right there. We're going to come back in just a little bit. We're going to continue that conversation. And we're also going to be bringing you something today that's to this particular hour on CNN. The story of Curveball. Who is Curveball? He may just be the only person that the Bush administration used as their source for going to war in Iraq, or certainly as much as anyone else. Was he right? No. Who is he? No one's known up to now. An exclusive interview with Curveball. Stay with us. We'll be right back. CNN, so many of you, 23,000, I believe, when we last checked, are talking to us, watching this newscast, as well as on MySpace and Facebook. In fact, there's somebody on MySpace right now. She's watching our show, and she just wanted us to know this. She said, my son, 17 years old, excited about college. I'm worried that I won't be able to get a loan to settle down. My husband's hours are going to come back from work as well. This absolutely affects all of them. And that's what we're doing, what we're trying to do for you. Let's go back now and bring in Sal, if we can. Sal Khan. He explained to us moments ago what it is that is actually the problem, what it is that is broken. Now, let's take the next step. Let's try and understand, because everyone seems to be wondering, I don't understand this bailout / rescue plan that the government's been in. What is the government actually doing? Explain that to us so we can understand it like a fifth grader.
Right. So the main problem, to take the big picture, was that no one's lending to each other. So what the government, at least, said that they wanted to do is try to get the lending started again. So their bailout plan was essentially, let's buy out these toxic CDOs. Because let's say I'm a good bank that didn't get involved in this. If a bank.
So everybody cool with this? I like the way he has this design. So we wipe out the bad assets. This equity basically shrinks to be a negative, right? Insolvent or illiquid? Insolvent, right? So you don't have enough assets to pay off your liabilities. So you're upside down on your balance sheet.
Bank A is holding these toxic CDOs. I'm not sure if Bank A should be bankrupt if the toxic CDOs are worth nothing, or maybe they are good for the money. So there's a lot of uncertainty on what these are worth. the government, at least what they said they would do, is if they went in and essentially these reverse auctions and bought these assets, then that all of a sudden would give confidence in these banks. There wouldn't be uncertainty as to whether you could loan the money, and maybe that will free up the credit, the whole system again. Will it work? Probably not. If you think about what's going to happen,
that was a cool prediction.
So Bank A, if you were to, let's say that, if you were to just switch this toxic CDOs, and if you were to just turn that back into cash, because the government just bought it for exactly what Bank A says it's worth. So if you just turn this into cash, the question is Bank A all this fun going to start lending? And those are things to think about, because besides that toxic CDO, there are other things on its balance sheet. And frankly, a lot of these things are starting to get a little bit toxic. No one's really talking about them right now, because if you have a dead skunk in your house, you're not going to notice the milk is not bad. So essentially, a lot of assets on your balance sheet right here that if you're a prudent bank manager, you're going to say, boy, I should just keep that cash, because if these turn toxic, because the economy might be turning south, or for whatever reason, I should just hold on to that cash so that I don't go bankrupt. So everyone is in complete survival mode, even the good banks. If somehow you were to give them capital, and Paulson's new version of the plan is that essentially they'll inject equity, so buy stocks. If you buy stock, you'll essentially make these buy bigger and put some cash here. But even this guy, the good bank, it's not so clear to me that he'll actually start lending. Everyone is in survival mode. This isn't a time to make new loans and take on new risks.
So he was right on that prediction too. When they introduced part of the bailout plan, they forced good banks to do it as well, and they just parked the cash. They didn't end up loaning it out, so kind of the sporting cash.
Seems like the government went in and they decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go in there and help these guys out. As soon as we help them out, everybody will realize that now they have the government's backing, so other people will be interested in helping them. More people will give them their money. That hasn't worked. The people and other investors haven't bought into that. When we come back, I want to hear your idea of what perhaps the government should have done or could still do to rescue this. It's unique, it's different, and you and I talked about it earlier, but I want you to be able to share it with our viewers. Also, curveball story that we've been telling you about. This is going to be seen and exclusive to this hour about one particular individual who no one has ever talked to before. He only speaks German and Arabic. We'll hear his conversation here. So we understand that what actually is broken. We've got a sense of what the government tried to do to fix it, but it doesn't seem to be working because enough people / investors and regular folk don't seem to be buying into it. Let's bring in Sal Khan once again from the Khan Academy and talk about what may be done. Either A, would have been the original plan that would have worked a lot better, or something we can still do now, and that is. So the big picture, just going back to the big picture, is that the financial system, no one's lending through, right? Every bailout plan so far, the government is keeps injecting money in, either through loans, either through buying assets for maybe more than they're worth, or now buying stock. And the logic here is maybe that will start up the lending, but mostly any new money that you put into the system, to a large degree, it's just going to go into survival mode, or it's going to go to essentially make up mistakes that have already been made. So one idea, and this actually came from a friend of mine, Todd Klutsky, and I actually think it sounded crazy when he first said it, but it actually sounds like a really good idea, is take that $700 billion, and remember, the problem isn't, you're not trying to save the financial system, you're trying to save the pipe that goes from the capital to the project. So why not take the $700 billion and capitalize a brand new financial system? I mean, and one thing that Todd had pointed out, $700 billion is an astronomical amount of money. That's more than the book value of the equity. Book equity is this piece right here on the balance sheet. That JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Washington Mutual, Wachovia, and Bank of America combined. So the government could overnight create banks bigger than those banks, although I don't think that they should concentrate it all in 5 or 6 banks. They should. So in other words, you're saying, why try and put money in something that is so absolutely messed up? If they're hacked dead, let them die, create a new system altogether. But wouldn't that be a problem too? Because then wouldn't those banks be owned by the government? Do we want that? No, and this is the solution. And first of all, just to make a point clear, the
Paulson's current solution involves government ownership. This plan, what you could do is the government could capitalize the banks, maybe 20 to 30 banks around the country with the $700 billion. And then each of those banks could have 300 million shares, and they could give one share to every American.
New banks, totally new banks. Interesting. Sam, Todd, thanks so much. We'll keep you on. We're going to be talking about this throughout the hour, obviously. We're trying to get people who can explain some of these things for us, and that's the market doing right now. Let's make that as big as we possibly can. Down 71, a lot better than we were looking at an hour ago. Maybe you have to sell in some cases, hopefully. All right, we're going to come back to that in just a little bit, but obviously, the key stories that we've been saying today. The story of Curveball, the man who we seem to have been the source of the influence in the invasion of Iraq. As we expected, South Carolina's bit of a hit. Does things kind of differently, doesn't it? And a lot of you have a lot of comments and a lot of questions for him, including this one. Let's go ahead and take a photo of it. This one comes in from a Sanch fan. Yeah, he watches this show a lot, like every day. He says, keep calm talking. Look, the market is going up. It can be. I didn't notice that for some reason in the conversation. Let's do this real quick. I want to just step away from this for a moment. Well, thank you so much, Sal Khan, standing by. Sal, tell us if you could. I just bring us back to basics. How are we being affected by what we're seeing in the news every day, the credit crunch and the situation with the market?
Sure. If we don't unclog the credit system, we know that everyone's going to unlever their debt. So we're going to have deleverage. That's essentially everyone unwinding their loans. Deleverage, and this is, I think, a critical point because I think there's been a lot of misinformation out there that actually contracts the money supply. So a lot of people out there are worried about inflation, these deficits that lead to inflation. But when you have deleverage, and this is what happened in Japan, this is what happened in the 30s, the money supply contracts. That's our printing press. Leverage is our printing press in the fractional reserve system. And that's going to lead to deflation. So I think a lot of people are worried about, are we going to see inflation or are we going to see deflation? And if we don't fix the problem, we're going to see what Japan saw, and we're going to see deflation. And so
deflation means what? Concretely to me and you.
Things get cheaper, the opposite of inflation. So unfortunately, maybe salaries will go down, but on the plus side, a lot of assets, people buying a house will get cheaper even. I know that probably won't be a good thing in the short term.
Yeah, exactly. That was what the situation is right now. Thanks so much, Sal Khan. You've been a great guest. What an original way of being able to explain things. We're going to be right back with the closing.
All right. So, kind of a different look. I thought this one was interesting that it gave us a perspective of right in the moment of the market, crashing and all the stuff that people were thinking about, a lot of different issues. Questions or comments? Yeah. I have no idea. That was some promotion. I do not know what the curveball was. Yeah, it was a big deal apparently at the time, but I don't think it went anywhere. Yeah, Eric?
So at the time this was happening, you said you were a real estate. How did you feel about that?
So it didn't hit the real estate market till a little bit later, but the lending dried up. So the writing on the wall for me was in the spring of 2008. We had a project that was about $1.6 million project that we were looking to get a $1.2 million loan on or something to get started. And it was weird, like we were getting close towards the end of the getting qualified or getting it through the bank, approval system. And then they started saying, well, we need this document. Well, we need this. Oh, we're going to need more capital for this project. And all of a sudden it started dragging on and on and on. And then ultimately we came to learn that it's because the banking system was already starting to quake in the spring because they kind of saw the writing on the wall and they started pulling back already on loans back then. And this was long before the fall happened. So from a real estate perspective, I saw it from the lending end fairly early on. From the fall in prices, the asset prices, as far as the prices of our real estate and that market dropping out, that really didn't happen until later, deeper into November and then the following year, where we saw real estate prices really going down.
You saw that trend where it was hard people to get money to buy a house.
Yeah, harder to buy a house, yes, and then certainly for us doing commercial ventures that were probably a little bit more on the risky side than than Joe Blow buying a house, Joe Blow family buying a house. But it happened there too. Okay, anything else? All right, so the last thing I want to show you is a quick thing on Dodd-Frank. We're going to do 2 Dodd-Franks, but I'm going to save the other one for later. This is Elizabeth Warren, who is a Democrat who was helping to get the Dodd-Frank bill passed. And there was another video that I just watched that was Trump signing off his new bill with the Dodd-Frank. This is very much a hot issue. So here's what Dodd-Frank was.
Right? It was only somewhere back on page 31 and 35 they felt that was the world that they were in the big banks making hand over fist. And they've done it on credit cards, they've done it on mortgages, they've done it on payment loans, they've done it pretty much throughout the economy. With Dodd-Frank, we began the unbelievable game. We built the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Here's this little agency that's been up and running just not even quite 4 years yet. And it has already forced the biggest financial institutions in this country to return more than $10 billion to
You might want to take notes on this Dodd-Frank stuff.
We've got higher capital standards because of Dodd-Frank. We're working right now on getting living wills in place and resolution authority so that the idea that these too big to fail banks will be able to call on the American taxpayer, we're figuring out ways to dial down the risk. I'm incredibly proud of what we built. We built Dodd-Frank, the biggest, most powerful institutions on this information. There's the most amazing David versus Goliath story. You know, they spent more than $1 million a day fighting against financial reform and particularly fighting against that consumer agency. But we found that this is what Americans for Financial Reform was built. We came together, we put groups together from all around this country. We didn't have much in the way of resources, but boy, we all done it in there. We fought and we proved. They became Goliath. That's the meaning of Dodd-Frank. Let's be clear. When the banks sat back day after Dodd-Frank passed, they had said, well, it's over. Okay, now this thing's going to go into effect and really change your business model. In fact, what I heard they said was, it's just half time. Now the real battle begins. And the banks have been out there fighting. You know, so much of Dodd-Frank implementation takes rules being put in place by the SEC, by the Fed, by others, and big banks, their lobbyists, their lawyers, every single thing, always pushing in the same direction. Create a little exception for us here, a little loophole there. We get the rule over on this and make it a little more complex in a way that we'll be able to. Dodd-Frank has done good things. This country ourselves. The banks in 2008 were too big to fail, are now substantially bigger than they were. They continue to pose a real threat to this economy. We need to stand strong behind Dodd-Frank and we need to expand Dodd-Frank. We need the largest financial institutions in this country understand they can't build their business models from a machine. And they can't get out there and take crazy risks and expect the American taxpayer to pick up the tab when something goes wrong. That's what we see. And we've got to stand for every single thing. Because the banks are out there fighting for what they want. We got to be fighting for.
Okay, so discussion. those big banks, David versus Goliath. What questions would you have for Elizabeth Warren? So government intervention. That they created, the CFB, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB. We must protect the public from these big evil. So Khan said, "Let them die." You know, alternative. What does this speak to? Moral hazard or adverse selection? If we were to choice of bailout or let them die. Yeah, which one creates a moral, yeah, and in what respect? So yes, moral hazard.
They know they're going to be done out, so be less likely.
Yeah, so if the rules of the game are some sort of bailout, then they take on more risk, right? If you know you're going to, you guys maybe have done that, well, mom and dad will bail me out of jail if I get into trouble big time or whatever. They'll bail me out financially if I can't quite pay my bills, right? When I go out on my own, I can fall back on dear old dad to pay the electric bill if it's going to get shut off, right? So we might behave a little differently knowing that we don't have to do it ourselves. And so, should we have bailed out the banks? That Khan thing sounded pretty crazy, but at the same time, kind of interesting to maybe just let the banks, the owners of the bank fail, and would the financial system be completely seized up? Well, take banks that are seem to have a good track record or something, and they'll basically provide them the capital rather than the big banks. So it was definitely a choice to preserve the big banks, but then after we do that, we're going to get out the stick, the Dodd-Frank stick, and beat them down for Goliath. We must beat them up. My question would be is, who's going to watch David in the David versus Goliath fight? Are we confident that David is going to be able to carry out everything in an orderly way and not look out for David's interests, David being the government? So what sort of checks and balances do we have in place for that? In addition to what might happen on the lending side. So those are some of the interesting things. We'll the next video we'll show on Monday is we must cancel Dodd-Frank. So that was a huge supporter of Dodd-Frank, Elizabeth Warren, and we'll watch one that thinks Dodd-Frank should be thrown in the trash can. All right, have a good weekend. Bye, Paige.